today we're going to talk about a sequel from the summer of 1990. It was actually the sequel to Die Hard. Die Hard 2, directed by Renny Harlin, with a budget of $70 million. Now, $70 million in 1990, that was pretty big, pretty big.
So it came out in 1990. It's called Die Hard 2. It's not called Die Hard 2, Die Harder. That's incorrect. That's right off the bat. I know other people are probably rolling their eyes. No, it's not called that. That was a poster slug line, so that's all it was. It wasn't Jaws 2, just so you're safe to go back in the water or whatever. It's just called Die Hard 2 in the movie.
And I still remember being on a beach at 18 years old in Manasquan Beach and a plane flying by. Go see Die Harder.
Yeah.
And nowhere in the credits does it say Die Harder. It's
right.
Die Hard 2, beginning and at the end.
And not to go on a tangent, but yeah, I love the simplicity of a sequel where it just has the number. Like, the first movie's Die Hard. The second movie's Die Hard 2. And then after that, this is a series where every other title is stupid. They had to get, like, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard. Just call it Die Hard 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Please. And, go back in time, 20th Century Fox, 1995.
Exactly.
Call it Die Hard 3.
And the fancier they got, the worse the movie.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. But yeah, so to your point, the movie came out in 1990. It was a big bombastic summer. Like, 1989 was sort of the starting point for this idea that every movie that was going to come out over the course of a summer, every weekend, was these massive bombastic films. And Die Hard 2, $70 million in 1990 is huge.
That's gigantic. And this film is known actually for two strange things. The first use of digital technology. There's actually a digital composite shot with a matte painting, which is the last scene of the movie where they pull away to the airport.
Okay,
That's the first time they used that. And another thing, this was the first time that product placement actually sued a movie studio. It was for a power drill called the Univolt.
Oh.
Black & Decker sued and actually settled out of court. There was a scene where Bruce Willis actually took this power drill and fixed this panel or whatever. Now you can't find any of that footage anywhere, but he did it, and then they cut it out of the movie, and they had this whole promotion they were going to do for Father's Day and everything like that. So it's actually kind of a funny little bit of trivia there.
I had heard that actually on a different YouTube channel, like where they were talking about the film. I like to talk about the context, and this is a summer, and I said bombastic.
Yeah.
You had these gigantic movies, and they were all stacked up. You had Days of Thunder, Dick Tracy, Gremlins 2.
The new batch.
That actually is called that, I think.
Yes.
You had Total Recall. You had another 48 Hours. And these were these gigantic movies. And I just remember how loud, every one of those movies I just said, very loud.
Especially Total Recall. Like, you could leave the theater being like...
They were headache-inducing. And yet, the biggest movie of the summer, Ghost. The funny thing that's about 1990 is it's like the last gasp of the 80s. Because all those movies I named seem like they're more 80s movies than they seem 90s movies.
Oh, yeah.
When you get to 1991, you start to see more of a 90s feel.
Yes.
But yeah, so Die Hard 2, very much in that 90s action movie tradition. Mm-hmm. It's a sequel to the first movie that came out in 1988. And
they get to the action fast.
It really does. And I will say, it's one of those sequels that's a remake. Because it's basically Die Hard, only on a much larger scale.
Yes.
I mean, it's very much the same premise of the first movie, only instead of it being an office building, it's an entire airport, Dulles Airport, on Christmas. Is it Christmas Eve in the movie, I think? It's right around Christmas.
Christmas Eve. And
so obviously it's very heavy travel day, so...
Yeah, and of course, again, Bruce Willis's wife is the damsel in distress, this time on a plane that's coming in.
Right. So yeah, so basically terrorists, we'll call them terrorists.
We'll call them terrorists.
Mercenaries, however you want to call it, basically are able to take over ground control for Dulles Airport so that they can have this whole cockamamie scheme to rescue a deposed dictator from a foreign country.
And the name of the foreign country, by the way, is the same fictitious... is the same fictitious foreign country used in the movie Commando.
Yes, it's supposed to tie... So, way before Marvel tried it, Joel Silver was already making his cinematic universe.
Yes.
So yeah, although it's a cinematic universe of Joel Silver where the movie Lethal Weapon 2 exists, because in the film, somebody's reading a magazine on the airplane, one of the airplanes that's in danger, and there's an ad for Lethal Weapon 2's video.
Oh, so you gotta love it.
Yeah, so basically the terrorists take over this airport. Bruce Willis is the only one that seems to understand that there's an actual plot going on. Nobody listens to him until it's too late,
No,
kind of like in the first movie.
No,
And then he's alone, the one that has to sort of save the day, which is basically Die Hard.
And basically, the character that Paul Gleason plays in the original Die Hard is like, he's dumb, he's misinformed, he won't listen. That's Dennis Franz.
Yeah, Dennis Franz
Dennis
plays...
Franz is a really good actor. Unfortunately, plays very one note until later on, until like kind of the very end. But he's a really good actor, and if anyone was born to play a cop, and he's played it a record amount of times.
He looks like the part. So yeah. But yeah, Dennis Franz is the head of the police in the airport. Fred Dalton Thompson runs basically runs the airport and ground control.
Another actor who showed up in a lot of stuff. I just saw him in White Sands the other day.
Right.
He was in everything.
He was in Days of Thunder.
Yeah, Days of Thunder.
He was
Hunt
actually
for Red October. Good actor from a guy who was like one of the Watergate lawyers.
Yeah, he was not an actor. He was a politician.
Yeah.
He was in a movie called Marie. In the mid '80s, he played himself, I believe, in that film. It was a Sissy Spacek film that talked about a forgotten film, and he played himself. And I guess people were like, "Hey, he's appealing. We should put him." And he ended up stumbling in at like the age of 60 or something into a movie career. Then he had a political career again, and it didn't quite go so well. He ran for president.
That's right. But he had a lot of gravitas.
Good actor.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
I always felt like if you couldn't get older Rip Torn,
Yes.
you called him up.
So basically, you set up the plot of the film pretty quickly. Bruce Willis has to defeat the bad guys and get his wife, rescue her. She's on because the planes can't land in the airport. They're circling, and I guess they make a dialogue at some point that says any of the planes that could be diverted have been. So
yeah.
it's
and it's a horrible storm, and
yeah, it's
Fred Dalton Thompson sounds really cool. When he speaks, the man sounds cool. Those things are going to be dropping on the White House lawn. He just makes that sound really cool.
It's a very action movie thing to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the movie does, the movie does have, and here's a problem. So we have the bad guys, William Sadler, who we see naked with a remote control at the beginning of this. I just saw an interview with him, and he said that he waited the entire film to get in like amazing shape.
They let him film it at the end, yeah.
Yeah, just so he can look really good. He said, I don't want to be looking back at 60 and see myself,
right,
pretty much naked during the scene.
Ironically, about how old he is now.
This movie has too many villains, and to me, you have Colonel Stewart.
That's the William Sadler.
That's the William Sadler role. You have General Esperanza, who's Franco Nero.
Franco Nero's the deposed dictator that they're trying to liberate. Let's call it that.
Yes, and then you have John Amos, who ends up being, spoiler alert, ends up being the bad guy and ends up being in on it. Colonel Stewart is a bad guy. Okay, they do bad things, and you were talking about this the other night, and
yes.
It is shocking to watch. They actually give false information and have a plane crash, and people die. And that scene, like you were saying the other night, you could not get away with that scene.
Yeah.
That scene is horrifying to watch. That is horrifying.
I'm always surprised at that. Yeah, like and they make a point. I think they say like 230 people are on the plane when it crashes. We see little kids. We see kindly old ladies. And
Bruce Willis finds like a kid's doll with that's all like singed from the fire.
It's like the midpoint of the movie, like if with the screenwriting 101, you have to have the hero have the low point. That's the low point for Bruce Willis's character.
And it takes a couple minutes to recover. There's actually a scene where Bruce Willis is sitting on there. And Fred Dalton Thompson's like, you did what you could do, and he's like, it's not going to help those people. I remember feeling really like, even in the theater, feeling really like, first of all, you were surprised it happened on the big screen. It's even worse during a time where that seemed to happen all the time, hijackings and stuff like that. But you watch it now, and it's very, very jarring. That scene still.
Here's the thing I would say about the film. That scene is shocking. Because I don't think they would do it now. I think that they would lighten it up. I don't think this, again, like I said, I don't know if it would be R-rated even, but it's a very, very, very violent movie. Like, I've seen this movie probably since 1990. I've probably seen it 15 times. Yeah. That's a lot. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it is. Watching it again, like this past week, I was, again, just shocked at how bloody it is. Like, when they shoot a kindly old man to commandeer a church, which is their base of operations, bad guys, and there's, like, blood flying everywhere, and it's real blood. None of this CGI nonsense.
If they really killed that old man. It was his last day of shooting.
It's actually, there was no stunt work.
And they didn't have to pay him, which is great.
But the movie is extraordinarily violent. Like, people are getting stabbed in the eye with ice picks. There's people just getting shot,
one guy,
stabbed, and
one nice guy
brutal.
gets like his throat slit, and that's how we discover how John Amos is back. To get back to my point for a second,
it's very gruesome.
I think my problem with the three villain thing is that I would, again, it's tough to cut from Alan Rickman, who was just so great.
Right. No, I'm good. I'm going to cough the rest of the time.
And no.
We have to cut.
We have to cut.
No.
And the thing is that because it's three, I feel like they're not all clearly defined now. I know that apparently the reason for all this to liberate General Esperanza, which because he's against communism.
Yeah,
That's,
they're right wing bad guys, which is weird.
which
You don't really get to see that too much.
No, and what's really weird is you have this guy coming to the airport, and this is such a big thing, and they show it on the news, but there's really no airport security geared toward this. And every time something's brought up to Dennis Franz, who's in charge of all this, it seems like everything is just an annoyance to him. Like, and we got it taken care of, McLean. Everything's fine, McLean. But like, you have like a major drug dealer coming into custody. Okay, so there's really nobody to guard this guy or anything like that. There's two people on the plane and one person guarding him, and that's my problem too. Franco Nero actually, who plays Esperanza, actually kills the guy who's guarding him, and then takes over the plane on the way down. And I'm thinking to myself, was that even necessary? A, when you had these guys who were going to just have this plane rerouted and had weapons and that could have saved them. But I'm thinking, all right, so they went through that. That's where it gets to me just a little bit wonky in the thinking. And there's also the thing at the beginning. Bruce Willis discovers two guys in the baggage car. And what they're basically putting in the baggage car is so they can tap into the tower and listen to the tower. Now, this is my problem with this. If these guys can hijack an airport from a remote location, what do they need to show up at the airport for to do this? It seems a little wonky. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe it's going to make that crack team that comes in led by John Amos look more legitimate when they found it. But then I thought, why not just give it to them and just pretend that they found it to begin with? It's a little... Some of the thinking is just a little wonky in this movie. Like, for instance, we see...
How many more times can Darren say wonky, by the way?
By the way, we're playing a wonky
It's a drinking game.
Drinking game with wonky.
This is alcohol, so no, I'm
No,
kidding.
no. But like even when you see William Sadler at the beginning, all him and his men are leaving a hotel from somewhere. Okay, that's no problem. They're leaving a hotel. And then we see them in the airport, just so conveniently him and Bruce Willis can see each other and run into each other, and later Bruce Willis can be like, yeah, that was Colonel Stewart. And if you think about it, in the next scene, Colonel Stewart's men are at that church commandeering the place. So what I don't quite understand is they set the scene up for Bruce Willis, for him to know the bad guy, but why was the bad guy really at the airport at that scene?
I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
I'm going to answer everything Darren just pointed out, and you're absolutely right. This is a movie that has quite a few plot holes in it. Mm-hmm. One of them is very specifically... that I was thinking about, and it's funny you also hinged upon it, is Franco Nero is being brought to America. He's on a plane. There's absolutely no reason for him to kill anybody. It actually makes his life more difficult because then he has to try landing the plane. Which didn't make any sense. But when you like a movie, you're going to forgive every plot hole because this movie is so fast paced and so well done with the action scenes and the comedy and the drama, and you don't really care about that.
You give it a pass and you go with it.
But that's what I mean. So to talk about on a larger scale, I think that you're absolutely right. You could poke holes in this movie all day, and you should, because they exist. It's not like you can just say, oh, well, I don't care because it's a good movie, but you kind of do.
Yeah.
But what's funny is now to compare this movie to the last Die Hard movie, which was called...
Was that A Good Day to Die Hard?
A Good Day to Die Hard. We're going to call it Die Hard 5. Die Hard 5 is a movie that it's got equal amounts of ridiculous plot holes, but yet, because it's a bad movie, you latch onto them and you can't get past them because the other stuff that you go to these movies for, the action and the comedy and the excitement, isn't in that film.
No.
So I think that's the difference, is because when a movie has a lot of plot holes, I'm sure the first Die Hard has plot holes.
Yeah, but the first Die Hard seems like a better constructed film.
It is a better constructed film. I think it was a little bit stronger. I like Die Hard better than Die Hard 2. Mm-hmm. It's close. I do like Die Hard 2 a lot. But I think the problem is that, like, with movies in general, like, you could take any film and really pick it apart if you really don't like it.
It's true.
And if you like a movie, you're gonna say, that's fine. You're just being nitpicking now. It's like with the new Star Wars movies. Like, there's whole videos where people take like 6 hours and point out every painful thing in them. And I'm like, that's fair. And I think there's a validity to that. But
no, but also
you really have to be careful because every movie has plot holes.
Exactly, and you could do that. And I mean, I was a little more critical with looking at it, but I always remember enjoying 2. I always thought that 2 was a great ride. I thought that it looked good. I thought the action sequences were really good.
It's great.
I thought that it was nice that they threw in Al Powell for the first movie, Reginald VelJohnson. He needs help with something. I love the fact that it's the 90s now, which is funny how we're talking about the 90s. Or 30 years ago, so there's like a Radio Shack reference, there's a fax machine, there's old telephones in it, payphones.
This is a movie that wouldn't exceed, you couldn't make this movie now the way it is because there's cell phones now.
No.
So it's like one of those movies where, yeah, like the problems would have been solved by current technology.
Yeah, we're blocking their CB frequency, and we can't do that. But the main bad guys, I think, are all three of them are all really good actors, and they all come off looking fine in the film. I just kind of wish there was a little more of a central one, and I guess the one that is the most central is William Sadler. He's the one that you hate.
He's the main bad guy.
Really, the main bad guy.
More so, like in the first movie, it really is Alan Rickman. In the third movie, it's really Jeremy Irons. But yeah, this one, there's like, you're right, the bad guy. And it's not William Sadler's fault. I think William Sadler does a great job.
Does a fine job.
He's really good in the film. He's kind of an underrated actor.
And he's creepy from the beginning.
Yeah, you buy him. That scene where he is doing the naked calisthenics is a good way to set him up.
And it's creepy. The music's creepy.
The music is good. You know you're seeing the bad guy when you're watching the opening of the film.
Exactly.
But yeah, why he's at the airport in the first place, that's going to hurt his plan instead of helping it. You can't really fault that. You had to have a scene where Bruce Willis sees the guy, otherwise the rest of the movie doesn't work, and they don't have any scenes together otherwise.
And also the fact that it is very similar to the first one. He has to have like kind of this cool relationship with another African American guy. So the character of Barnes is kind of like the Reginald Bell Johnson character, though not as involved in that situation. But that's kind of his friend, and they kind of help each other and do.
Now
their
his
thing.
name is in real life. Is he Art? I always get
Art Evans.
It's Art Evans because there's another actor with the first name Art that's not the same actor, and I always confuse their names. But yeah, let's say it's Art Evans. If it's wrong, I apologize in advance. He's like a good actor. He's in a lot of movies, and he's kind of the hero of this movie too. In the same way that you're right, like Powell is in the first movie.
Yeah, he figures out how to communicate with the planes.
Yeah, he saves the day just as much as anybody else in the film, and even like Fred Dalton Thompson ends up being a pretty good guy, and even Dennis Franz ends up being a pretty good guy at the end of the day. But so yeah, the other bad guy that's in the film, and it is a little bit of a contrivance, is William Atherton is back as the newscaster jerk from the first movie. He's on the plane with Holly. Because, why not? And it didn't bother me because, it adds a little bit to the movie. But you had to give Holly something to do. And if they didn't do that, then because it really doesn't fix the movie to have him, because he realizes what's happening and he, like, causes a panic in the airport. Which really doesn't make any difference in the grand scheme of the film. But it's kind of a nice little scene in the film. And William Atherton, very good at playing that kind of a jerky role. That was kind of his specialty.
That and Ghostbusters, like, he was the guy that you like to hate. He was the Dick, and she even calls him Dick. That's his first name. And they make a joke about that. There is a really funny, weird sequence in this film where Holly is on the plane at the beginning, Bonnie Bedelia's character, and she turns and this old lady takes out her taser, and she's explaining how she used it on her dog once. Talk about something that wouldn't go over now. And it's a weird scene, but what's even weirder is, I guess, even in 1990, could you actually have a taser on a plane, or were they just...
Yeah, back in the 90s, anything before 9/11, I think, was fine. You could just walk onto a plane with whatever weapons you wanted, I think. I mean, now...
Anything you wanted. You could cook and bring Cuisinart, salad shooter.
We can't have a regular-sized toothpaste tube in our carry-on luggage now. No. But back then, you could carry a taser. It's like the Parallax View, where Warren Beatty literally just buys a ticket on the plane for the plane that he's going on. Yeah, you just, boy, times have changed.
Things that you will never see again.
Younger people don't realize, because most of them don't really remember prior to 9/11 how lax things used to be. But let's not go off on the topic of 9/11.
But I do want to mention, my wife said when we watched it the other night, my wife had a real problem with the snow in this movie. She said the snow looks pretty bad, and there is one scene where Bruce Willis is off and he finds the church with Art Evans.
Yes.
And he puts his hand on a thing to wipe the snow away, and boy, that snow does not look like snow.
It looks like you could wipe it off the car that he's wiping it off to into a pot, put some milk in it, and make mashed potatoes, because that's what it looks like. Yes. It looks like instant mash. Here's the thing that I want to mention about the film, and it ties back a little bit to what you were referring to earlier. The movie was $70 million.
Yes.
It wasn't that it was an incredibly troubled production, but they had a hard time finding snow. So they had to move the production around a bunch, and I think that added to the time and the budget. And you needed
snow in like every sequence.
Yeah, so
the movie added background.
They were chasing snow the whole production of the film, and that's why some of the scenes where the snow is coming down are clearly probably filmed in like outside, like some place outside Los Angeles or something, where they were basically just stuck like on a studio ranch. But so the movie, as we said, was like kind of a huge film. It was the first major film for Rennie Harlin, the director.
Yes.
He was kind of the Michael Bay of the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
He made a lot of flashy action films like this.
And this show, I mean, this showed that, I mean, and you know, when you have the second movie, that's the start of the franchise. So, I mean, I could see why there's certain things where they, you know, like you were talking about, you mentioned this before, how with each film, and you can mention it now, it got bigger. It went from an office building to an airport
Yes.
to New York.
They lost sight, the franchises, as a general rule, loses sight of the premise. The premise of Die Hard was one man in a fairly confined space against the bad guys.
And the claustrophobia works for you in that.
Totally. And then the
Totally.
second movie, they expanded it to the airport. The third movie expands it to all of New York
All
City.
of New York City.
And it's no longer one man because he's teamed up with Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes.
The fourth movie is all of the Eastern Seaboard, and he's teamed up with the Mac guy.
Yes, that's right.
And then by the
Just a
fifth
moment.
movie, it's all of Russia with his son. And I think that's one of the reasons that the movies don't work as well after the second one.
No.
Now, I think the third movie's good. The fourth movie is passable. The fifth movie is garbage. The fifth movie is, and I'm
The
not
fifth
even,
one has destroyed the franchise.
it is the worst. It is one of the worst movies I've ever
And
seen.
they've been talking about making a Die Hard year one where it would be Bruce Willis would be older, John McClane, some actor would be
into
younger.
a flashback.
I don't think they're going to do this.
I don't think so. I think once 20th Century Fox got acquired by Disney, that kind of
That
I
went
think
away
it went.
the way
I think it got put on hold. But in any case, like the premise of these movies should have stayed like that. But then the problem is that if you made the premise of that every time, it would just be repetitive. So they were kind of stuck because the franchise needed to move ahead.
Yes.
And Die Hard 3 successfully kind of did that, but then they should have just stopped at that point. And I think also in the fourth movie and the fifth movie, you lose the heart. Like the first two movies, you know, especially the first one, Bruce Willis is, you know, trying to get back with Bonnie Bedelia, his estranged wife. The second movie, he's trying to save her. The third movie, they're not together.
But it ends with him giving her a call. because
There's
Sam
hope at the
Jackson's
end that
like,
he's yeah. The hope is at the end he's going to maybe reconcile with her, and I guess by the fourth movie they just went. Bruce Willis was into that mumbling, I'm bored as crap mode in the
Yes.
fourth and fifth movies. He looks like he doesn't want to be there.
And he also went.
And
yeah.
the emotional connection we had with John McClane is gone because he's not basically playing John McClane after the
No,
third
he went
movie.
from every man. Even when he does outrageous stuff in like the movies, you bought it. But this started happening with the third film, where literally he jumps from a bridge, him and Sam Jackson, and they crash land on the bottom of this thing. They're like, "Yeah, you okay? Yeah, okay." All of a sudden, he started becoming superhuman. Like in the fourth one, would you say he was?
He's jumping around on a fighter jet. In the second movie, he's jumping around on the wing of a plane that's about to take off, and that's kind of ridiculous. Or he's in a plane that's about to blow up, and he uses the ejector seat to escape the plane. Now, those are ridiculous. But again,
at least
because you're liking the movie,
Yeah.
you're more forgiving of it. By the fourth movie, you're
He's-
just like, come on.
he's like Superman. I mean, basically.
He can't be killed, and that's like something that action movies have kind of moved towards lately,
Yes.
especially since like the 2000s, I guess, because
Look at the John Wick movies; they're very entertaining. But you know that he's going to be fine. You
yeah,
know? And
there's
the
no
thing
there's
is-
no tension in any of the action scenes in those. I just watched the movie, and it's very similar to John Wick, and it's called Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. And once you realize he's not going to be killable, the tension's out of the movie. Even though the action scenes are fun and they're enjoyable to watch,
Mm.
you know, there's no tension. Like I don't think that Bruce Willis is going to die in Die Hard 2. I'm pretty sure watching that movie, sitting there eating my popcorn in 1990,
Yeah, you knew it wasn't going to happen.
he's going to save the day. He's going to kill the bad guys and win the day. But, you know, I didn't feel he was an unkillable, you know, superhero in the first. And he gets beat up a lot in both the first two movies.
No, and like you said
and
to me, a
it's
couple
way
days-
more it's way
yeah.
more exciting. I'm sorry, go on.
No, no, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You said a couple days ago, and it was true. When you watch these movies, especially the early ones, the violence hurts to watch.
Yes.
Bruce Willis gets hurt. I mean, think of the glass in his feet. In the first one, he gets knocked around a lot. In the second one, he pretty much in the second one he gets his ass kicked a lot. And you know, I mean, and you could see the blood, and you could see like, I mean, you know, you don't get a sense with now with what you're talking about. There's no sense of suspense anymore.
No.
You know that the main character, even if that does happen, you know that the main character is going to be fine. The appeal of the original Die Hard onto the really good sequels is that he was a man.
Yeah, and the action felt like you were really seeing action. You weren't seeing CGI, you know, characters punching each other. There's a couple of shots in Die Hard 2 on Blu-ray where it's clearly a stunt double, and that it doesn't bother me because it's really somebody really falling and really getting hurt.
And you have to admire the stunt people. And there's also a couple of shots in Die Hard 2. That plane sequence when they crash it is great. It's such a jarring sequence. Like I said, I think it took a couple minutes to recover, even watching it now, knowing it was coming. But at the end of that sequence, there's a really bad shot where Bruce Willis is obviously like standing in front of a screen, looking at the crashed plane. I wish they had taken that one shot out because it's the only one that kind of still looks a little.
I
strange.
don't mind old blue screen effects, and that's that's a personal preference.
Yeah.
There's two types of special effects that I've never really minded when I'm watching, especially when it's an older movie and I understand the technology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind blue screen, even if it's really bad, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which has some of the worst blue screens ever,
You can imagine.
which is shocking for a Spielberg
Him and Sean
film.
Connery in the plane. I mean, that looks
It's bad.
It's really bad.
But the other thing I don't mind is stop motion animation. Those are the two things I wish CGI didn't take away from us, because I like both of those things.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, there's definitely a couple of shots in Die Hard 2 that pass muster for 1990, but probably not 30 years later. Like a couple of the shots of the airplanes even flying are clearly, not real, like they're models.
Yes.
And it doesn't bother me, but yeah, to your point, there is that one shot where Bruce Willis is obviously standing in front of something that was superimposed. Among the minions of the main bad guy, you have Robert Patrick, looking almost exactly like he looks in Terminator 2.
I saw a guy, and this is not confirmed, but there's a guy who I saw twice in the movie that looked just like a young John Leguizamo. Was I wrong?
John Leguizamo's in the movie. One of the other bad guys is Don Harvey. So you had two of the rapists from Casualties of War being bad guys in this movie as well.
I noticed him in the phone booth.
Yes.
Too, which was kind of funny seeing him in the phone booth with these special kind of walkie-talkies, because I'm like, what's he in the phone booth for?
Right.
But visually it looks good.
And also one of the other bad guys, the one who gets the icicle in the eye,
yeah,
is our friend Meat from the Porky's movies.
I thought he looked familiar. In the Porky's movies, he gets like bigger and bigger, like heavier.
Yeah.
But that's funny. I thought that guy looked familiar.
Yeah, Meat. We're going to do Porky's 2 next. No, we're not. We're not going to do Porky's 2.
No.
But yeah, so
the next day, even though when you see the two cops go, remember the last time we rode on this road, which was the day
Porky's
before?
2 is loaded with stuff. I actually wrote a whole review of that at some point. I'll have to find it and share it with you guys. But yeah, so anyhow, like I said, this is a great movie. Siskel and Ebert actually, believe it or not, think this is a better movie than the first one. It's not. It's not as good as the first one. It's almost as good.
And Siskel liked both films, but he liked the second one.
Top 10 of his year. He put it in his top 10 for the year. Ebert liked the second one. He didn't like the first one because he said Paul Gleason bothered him in that movie. And that was like, what a dumb thing. All the action, all the excitement, all the enjoyment in that first movie ruined it for him.
And Paul Gleason was meant to be silly. He was meant to be uninformed. That was his character. But yeah, when I watched that review too, Roger Ebert takes it like personally, like I couldn't get around this whole thing.
It was such a weird thing not to like about the film. But in any case, if you're going to watch a Die Hard film that's not the first one, this is the best one. And like I said, there are people that will tell you the third movie is better than the second one, but those are the same people that tell you The Last Crusade is better than Temple of Doom. You're wrong.
I love
wrong.
Temple of Doom kicks. We should.
Temple of Doom is way better.
Temple of Doom.
We might have to do that one. But in any case, I would definitely say that this is a fun movie. I was surprised at how R-rated it was. We don't get action movies like this anymore.
And you also mentioned like the F word is used a lot in
this movie. Has more swearing in it than any other non-Scarface R-rated movie that I can think of, and it's just casual. It's casually used throughout the entire film. Like Dennis Franz has a scene where every other sentence he says has the F word in it.
Full F in forensics. Like there's this thing where he goes.
It's loaded with. It's a very R-rated film. The only thing it doesn't have for an R-rated movie, there's no gratuitous nudity. Even the first Die Hard has that one
in that
quick
office
shot.
scene. Yeah.
Or in movies when we were lamenting the fact that PG movies used to have nudity.
You could watch the opening sequence of Looker and see nudity, and it was like rated PG.
Looker should be R-rated. Let's be honest. But let's not go off track.
Yes, because
too far. Yes. But yeah. So I definitely would say if Die Hard is a 10, and it is, I would say this is probably a 9. I was really impressed with how enjoyable this film is. Die Hard 3 is about a 7. Die Hard 4, it's still about a 7. I kind of like it. And then Die Hard 5 though, I would actually give Die Hard 5 a 0. And I'm not even being like mean on that one. That movie was not in releasable condition. 20th Century Fox should be ashamed of themselves that they released that film in the condition it was in.
Horrible movie.
Really hated it.
But to go back to 2, I think I agree with every one of your number things except the second one. I wouldn't give it a 9. I would give it an 8. And this is the reason why. There are a couple of things in here. First of all, okay, like you said, you can attack this movie's logic, And if you could do that with any movie, you would ruin it.
No, you're fair enough.
But there is one point in this movie where we find out that these guys we thought were the good guys are bad guys, and they stage a fake firefight with Colonel Stewart and his men, John Amos's men.
Okay,
And
I think I know where you might be.
they're shooting blanks. So Bruce Willis has to. So Bruce Willis has to explain this to Dennis Franz, who of course is not listening to him. He pushes,
Even at this point in the movie, by the way, Dennis Franz is still like, yeah, they're bluffing.
yeah,
I'm
whatever,
sorry, go
whatever, McClane. And he pushes Dennis Franz over, takes the gun out, and starts shooting. Like the machine
Bruce
gun.
Willis knows they're blanks.
Yeah,
Or he suspects they're blanks. We should say that.
yeah, he suspects.
He might be wrong. Well,
Yeah.
oops, I guess they were real bullets.
But he
I'm
was
sorry,
a dick anyway. Screw Dennis
Go
Franz.
on, go on.
So he shoots, and to make his point, to realize that whole firefight was staged, and that's what changes Dennis Franz's mind. He becomes like, okay, let's kick ass. He says.
Right.
But this is the thing. While the scene's going on, while Bruce Willis is clearly shooting a machine gun at the guy who's in charge, you have cops. They cut to a cop with a gun in his hand watching. Like, because why are you watching? It's just such an odd scene. I wish it had been done differently. Either that or him and Dennis Franz were in a room alone.
See, the thing is this is an 80s action movie, even though it came out in 1990. You can't have, in the era of Tango and Cash, you can't have Bruce Willis just take the gun, hand it to Dennis Franz, or hand him the clip that has blanks in it, and say, look, these are blanks.
No.
You have to have Bruce Willis shooting it because you need to have that extra.
That extra scene that makes it so intense. I just wish.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not to, but what.
And it makes it more dramatic. I just kind of wish that they either that or don't cut to the policeman who's sitting there kind of deciding.
It could have been
whether or not-
directed better. I'll
Yeah.
go with you on that. But I will say I support the scene. Now, the producer of this film, and I don't want to go off on a whole tangent. We won't because we're winding down.
We're winding down.
But Joel Silver is the producer of this film, and he produced the first one. He produced the Lethal Weapon films. The same summer, he produced Ford Fairlane.
Yes.
He produced The Matrix. He produced The Last Boy Scout.
Heavy action guy.
So he's an action guy, but he has this thing that he called the whammy scale. And all of your action movies have to have a whammy moment every like 5 to 10 minutes. And there were rankings for it. And he would say, like, if a guy pulls out a gun, it's a whammy.
It's a whammy.
If he fires the gun, it's a double whammy.
It's a double whammy.
If somebody gets shot and flies backwards and they break glass and everything, it's like, so it's a whammy scale. So at that point, probably they were like, okay, we haven't had a whammy in about 5 minutes. Let's have Bruce Willis shoot the gun off.
And
It's like just adding an extra level of excitement to a scene.
Yeah.
Damn the logic of it. And I totally agree. It's weird because you just see people standing there like, oh, it's like the guy just fired off a machine gun a foot away from you at a police officer or whoever he was shooting it at.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a silly scene, and
But to your
I
point, it is exciting.
understand why you would say it would knock it down a little bit, but yeah, it
Well,
didn't bother me. But
well,
I get it. I
that-
totally get it. Believe me.
Well, that and there's also a character who's a fine character actor. I don't know his name, who plays a janitor.
Oh yes. It's Tom Bauer, one of those guy actors.
Yeah, you're like I've seen him. In like
He's
a
been
million
in
things.
he's been in tons of movies. He's a good actor, definitely.
And he shows up as kind of a little bit of comic relief, but he's written in so convenient. Like Bruce Willis can't find this thing. This guy just happens to have a million maps down there, so he can leave Bruce Willis all over the airport. Bruce Willis can't tap into their thing, but he happens to have a walkie-talkie that hasn't been tapped into. He just to me was a writer's convenience. I like the actor.
There's definitely a lot of writer convenience in this film.
In this one.
It's definitely, but
where I was a little more surprised with the first one, but again, the second one is a machine. You get to the action quick. The film never lets up. There's never a dull moment.
No, it's a very fast, and it's only an hour. When the credits start, it was only an hour and 56 minutes.
Yes.
And we're saying now, like every action movie has to be a 2.5 hour epic. It was kind of nice and tight.
Yeah.
Very, very cleanly told, and even though it's got some flaws in it.
And like the first film, this was based on a book by William Wager called 58 Minutes.
Yeah, the first book is actually written by
Roderick
Thorpe, and I think in one of the movies, it might even be this one, they misspell his name in the credits. So the first book was actually a sequel novel to The Detective, which was Frank Sinatra.
Frank Sinatra
was in the movie. So Frank Sinatra apparently was
offered John McClane.
He had the right of first refusal to play John McClane in the first movie.
Yippee-ki-yay, baby.
Right. So the first movie was kind of tailored to make it into Die Hard. The second book was not a Die Hard sequel. They turned it into a Die Hard sequel.
Yeah.
And the third movie, the same thing happened. They wrote a screenplay that had nothing to do with Die Hard, and 20th Century Fox said, if we do a little bit here and a little bit there.
We can
This
make
could make this Die Hard 3, and that's so none of
That's
them were actually
funky.
written as a Die Hard movie. For all I know, the fourth and fifth movies were as well, but who knows?
But who wrote the fifth one?
Nobody cares about the fifth
The
movie.
fifth one. The fifth one we kind of pretend it just didn't happen. That's
It-
like, you
but
know,
it did.
yeah.
But it did.
That went over like a horn joke.
But yeah, can you imagine Frank Sinatra in Die Hard 2?
And
Or
that was
Die Hard 1 or 2? He was like, he had to be in his 70s by then.
And that was also. Oh, we should also keep in mind the part of John McClane, which has become so iconic in the '80s and '90s, was also offered to Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, Stallone.
It went. They lucked into Bruce Willis because he was perfect. He
And
was
it was a
absolutely
perfect time in his
casting.
career. It totally launched him from moonlighting, TV stardom to movie stardom. There's just one more thing I just want to mention. It is the last thing. There are, and this is one of the other reasons why I bring it down to an 8, which I still think is a good rating. There are some shit lines in this movie. There is.
Ah, yeah.
What is the line with? What is that one line with the?
Hey, Carmine, tell me something. What sets off the metal detectors first? Lead in your ass or the shit in your brains?
It's a really stupid line.
It sounded good on paper, I'm sure. And it almost sounds like a Dirty Harry line. But
yeah,
why would a metal detector be set off by shit?
exactly. And Reginald Vell Johnson says to him, "You're not peeing in someone's pool, are you?" He's like, "Yeah, and I'm fresh out of chlorine." Pretty stupid line. And then there's later on.
It sounds funny, but it's not a funny line.
But it's not funny. And Bruce
Okay.
Willis, I got to give him credit. He delivers both lines like they're great lines.
Yeah,
but
he
then
sells them.
But then you're just like,
Wait a minute.
and don't get me wrong. And looking back, I bet you everybody laughed their ass off in the theater during when it happened. But and then there is one of my favorite lines, and I swear this is where we're going to end it. Him and
Let's go 4 hours later. Now this is it.
this is it. This is it. We're going to finally end it.
Finally.
Him and the character of Barnes finally get to the church, and he goes, "That could be a sentry. He could also be going out for a walk." And Bruce Willis goes, "Yeah, well, if he is, he's walking over his same footsteps," which there's no way Bruce Willis could
No.
possibly see from the angle
Well-
that he's at, and that always made me laugh. That line, I'm like, you could see him go over his own footsteps, and then you just
Well, Bruce Willis is like William Shatner in Star Trek. He's perfect, and he knows everything, and like he's never wrong.
and he's the most important person in the.
He's the most important person in the world. But yeah, in any case, yeah.
Good solid film, good sequel, good beginning of the franchise.